The need to address global warming has led many countries and businesses to focus on energy transition. The shift from fossil-based energy production and consumption to renewable energy sources like wind, solar, and hydro. At COP26, President Muhammadu Buhari announced Nigeria's commitment to carbon neutrality by 2060 by focusing on 5 key sectors, which are power, cooking oil and gas, transport, and industry. Now, in the energy sector, some oil companies have taken action towards reducing exploitation of fossil fuels and production of greenhouse gases. Joining us to analyze this via Zoom is the Executive Director of African Network for Environment and Economic Justice, who is also an environmentalist, David Ogola. Good morning. Thank you for joining us on TVC Breakfast.
Thank you very much.
Good morning, Reverend.
Now, let's begin with how far we have come with regards to our commitment to carbon neutrality by 2060.
Thank you very much for inviting me to be part of these important conversations on how our country is moving towards carbon neutrality and perhaps assess how we the political will to ensure that we implement our commitment to the Paris Agreement on climate change. And at the same time, the role of the private sector, because obviously the private sectors like the multinational oil companies are major contributors to the gas flaring in the country, which produces the green gas that contributes to climate change problem. For the country, I will say that the political will is weak. That is majorly responsible for the lack of proper, comprehensive, integrated energy system in the country. And obviously, you can see that because the country majorly depends on over 90% of their foreign exchange from the oil, the fossil fuel industry, gives priority to the fossil fuel. But obviously, we look the global conversations around the fossil fuel. People are already moving towards alternative energy source, renewable energy source. Where is our country in this whole conversation? It is easy to have white papers, to have strategy paper, but the reality is that how do we translate all this energy transition strategy to a reality that the common people on the street will really see that the government is moving towards that direction? That is a serious issue to debate. But also let's look at the multinational oil companies that are coming from countries where their government is actually putting in place policies to help sustain the implementation of the Paris Agreement on climate change. Companies like Shell, Chevron, ExxonMobil, Total Energy, these are companies coming from countries where their country governments are really taking responsibility to ensure that there is total compliance. And these companies have signed on different standards. But unfortunately, these companies are operating double standards. They operate in Nigeria, very poor standard, taking advantage of the weak regulatory system. The NNPC is supposed to be providing a top regulations for this company. But unfortunately, because of lack of political will leadership, this company takes advantage of it. This is where we found ourselves, where we have weak implementation. That's why we have been facing this challenge, whether Nigerian government is actually carrying out the right investment in carbon neutrality.
All right, Reverend, when it comes to benchmark developments of this kind, Nigeria is not seen to meet up those kinds of benchmark. Recall that we had the MDG, the Millennium Development Goal, the target that was set, Nigeria didn't even meet half of it. It was upgraded to SDG. We're still somewhere struggling to meet some of the parameters here and there. Now, there are so many others, but when it comes to carbon neutrality, projecting to 2060, how different is this from all the other targets that Nigeria has included herself into?
You have said it all, and that's exactly why I used the phrase, the political will. This is really the problem, and that's why we have decided that there is no time the government is going to take the action to ensure that there's compliance, particularly when the government is signatory to the Paris Agreement on climate change. But the people, the stakeholders, have to take responsibility to bring pressure on the government. Even in advanced countries, the citizens are mobilizing. A few months ago, I came back from Vienna, Austria. Over 100,000 people were on the street bringing pressure on their government because they were hosting a conference that has to do with supporting the fossil fuel. And the government did respond to that action. So the people has to take responsibility, because otherwise the company will continue to operate in a manner that does not help to put the government under pressure. Because, like I said, the short-term economic benefit for the country today helps to reduce that will to ever happen. And so when you make a reference to the SDG goal, government who are making progress with the SDG are government that are actually putting a lot of resources on those commitments and those targets. If you compare the lack of will in our own government in putting the right resources in SDG, you can draw a conclusion that that's exactly what is happening with the Paris Agreement on climate change. And is it that our government do not know what the problem is? We are already facing the challenge in Nigeria. The last recent flood that has almost taken almost half part of a Bayelsa is an example to reflect on. Today, one key example to demonstrate why our government is not exercising a political will is the issue of gas flaring. You will agree with me that gas flaring is a major contributor to the climate change crisis in the world. And Nigeria is one of the leading countries in the world that produce gas flaring. And for over 20 to 30 years, the Nigerian government has been shifting the goalposts. Today, government is going to make a commitment that by the so date, we're going to end gas flaring. But so far, so good. This government hasn't taken the responsibility to end the gas flaring in Nigeria. And this is really unfortunate. And it also, again, encourages the companies, particularly Shell, which is a major culprit in this whole problem. And if the government has exercised the political will to bring pressure on Shell and other multinational oil companies, I can tell you that the issue of gas flaring would have become history in Nigeria. And we're wasting resources. And the people are paying a huge price because of lack of political will from the government. So where do we go from here rather than lamenting? And that's why some of us today, we're going out to the public to send a strong message to NNPC, particularly with the coming up of the AGM of Shell on the May 23rd in London. We want to send a strong message to Shell board members, shareholders, that it is now that the Shell and other oil companies in Nigeria must not take advantage of the weak regulators in Nigeria. Since NNPC is not able to regulate this company to ensure that they comply with the Paris Agreement, for them to take a very drastic action so that we cannot continue to be a victim of this problem. And so we're going out today to NNPC to send a strong message to our president, who coincidentally is the petroleum minister, and that they should withdraw the license of Shell, because Shell can no longer take an advantage of the weak regulation in Nigeria. And they operate the double.
Right. Reverend Ogolo, they're talking to us about their planned protest, trying to send a strong message to Shell with regards to how they are not committing to the climate change agreement that we saw happened during the COP26 and
yes.
all of that. Okay, right. We hear that Reverend Ogolo is back. I am wondering how much impact or pressure your decision to protest and send a strong message would have on Shell if the federal government is not putting pressure on them. What do you think would change?
Yes, that is exactly why you see most of these companies actually involve impunity in Nigeria. But on the target action towards Shell is a global issue. The citizens worldwide are calling on Shell. They must comply with the Paris Agreement. They cannot step aside from taking a very strong action to strengthen their investment in carbon neutrality. We think that even if Nigerian government begin to take a back seat on this, obviously because of the short-term economic gain, then Shell has a responsibility to operate in this climb so that they can continue to have the license to operate. But now that we have seen that they are taking advantage of the weak regulation in Nigeria, where the citizens of Nigeria, particularly the victims from the Niger Delta region, are asking our government, we are calling on our government to seize the license of Shell to operate in Nigeria. And I think this message is also going to the investors, because last year civil society, over 42 civil society wrote to the Church of England. We call on the Church of England as a major investor on Shell to withdraw their support for Shell. And we are happy that just a few weeks ago, the Church of England have just come out now to say that they are going to vote against Shell in their coming AGM in May 23rd. That for me is inspiring. It sends a strong message to other shareholders like the Norwegian Oil Fund, who we have also written a letter to now. Now we are targeting, we're using multiple strategies. While we're bringing pressure on our government to seize the license of Shell, we're also putting pressure on the shareholders, because now Norwegian Oil Fund is a major shareholder in Shell. And we have sent a strong message to them, and that they should also withdraw their support like what the Church of England have done. And hopefully that will send the right message to Shell and not to take an advantage of the weak regulations in Nigeria.
All right, Reverend, let's look at the issue, the new move by the federal government, prospecting for crude oil in new places in Nigeria. We've seen in the Benue Trough, in the middle part of the Middle Belt. We've seen in the Northeast, and where we hear stories of, or news of, new prospecting for crude oil. Now, how does that contradict the energy transition plan, where we are looking or planning to wind down on the use of fossil fuel into renewable energy, and then we're looking for new ways of kickstarting activities that will still keep us in that level of the use of fossil fuel? How does this contradict each other?
This is exactly why we had our People's AGM. Last year, we had our People's AGM in Lagos, where we had a big rally. We came out with the resolutions calling on the Nigerian government to avoid a situation that will send a strong signal to the oil company to think that the Nigerian government is not serious about the Paris Agreement. So this year, we have had our People's AGM in Abuja, and we have had our brothers and sisters coming from the northern part of the country where some of this oil has just been discovered. Now, the same red flag that has happened in the Niger Delta region is also going to happen. Now, the narrative that is going to the north is that prosperity.
Yeah, well, we just have some.
That's not true, because cause phenomenon. We are seeing the oil phenomenon problem in the Niger Delta.
Reverend, are you there?
All right, we seem to have
some
the
network
network challenge there from where he is. But I think the point he's making is actually right, because the questions are that when we're talking about transiting to, renewable energy, where we'll do away with the heavy use of fossil fuel that contributes to the challenges in climate change and all of that, how do we do that? Now, we have a lot of sun in this country. In the Northeast, the kind of sun you will not see in many parts of Africa, you see it in the Northeast of Nigeria, which is a good source of energy. Okay. Reverend is back.
It's back, right.
Yes.
Right, just finish your line of thought, then we'll ask you the next question.
So what I'm saying is that this narrative that prosperity is going to the northern part of the country because of the discovering of oil is not true. Obviously, the communities are not carried along. Obviously, the communities are not feel the consequence. And unfortunately, the Nigerian government, it seems to be taking a backseat on what is going on globally. Other countries are looking for alternative energy, renewable energy. Look what deforestation has caused the northern part of the country, desertifications. The climate change pains that will come to the north is obvious. But unfortunately, because of the short-term gain, this narrative of prosperity is being sent across the northern part of the country, which is really unfortunate. Now, in a resolution in our People's AGM in Abuja yesterday, we are calling on the northern governor to be wary of that narrative of prosperity, to begin to look and explore alternative source of energy, which is abundant in the northern part of the country. We are also appealing to the incoming government to take into consideration our Nigerian commitment to the Paris Agreement to climate change. That is the only way we can begin to build a future, because other countries around the world are building a future in renewable energy. Nigeria cannot be an exception. We cannot continue to depend on fossil fuel that has caused us pain, particularly in the Niger Delta part of the country. We have seen how an entire community has been wiped away. We have seen how people's livelihood have been completely wiped away. We have seen how farmland have been completely destroyed. Now, the means of the livelihood of the common people in the Niger Delta have been completely damaged by the fossil fuel industry. And these are caused by Shell, Chevron, and ExxonMobil across. And they are even moving away from onshore to offshore, abandoning their assets, now asking Nigerians to buy those assets. Who takes responsibility for the liability that they have caused? Now they abandon farms, they abandon streams, they damage environment. Who will take responsibility?
That's a big question. Who will take responsibility
of
all of the damage that has been caused to the environment?
Recall under former president.
Responsibility. Look, you're going to clean up. Challenge, my brother.
Right. All right.
Sorry.
Quickly, let me ask this question. What was the level of engagement with Shell before this decision to protest?
Well, they've been consistent. We've been very consistent. Last year, we had our AGM in Lagos, and we sent a very strong message to Shell. They didn't respond. You know, how can they respond when they have a weak government who does not regulate them to comply with this commitment? So they make more profit in the short term, but their reputation internationally is damaged. As we speak, there is mobilizations around the world. Come May 23rd in London, civil societies across the world will be sending a strong message to the shareholders of Shell. And Nigeria, we're joining this move to call on the Nigerian government to bring to spotlight the things that Shell are currently doing in Nigeria. In moving away, in the last COP's meeting, the issue of loss and damage received priority attention. In Nigeria, the damage that Shell and other companies have done for the Niger Delta, who is going to take responsibility? The cleanup of Ogoni is not going well as it is planned. You see that the access to clean water in Ogoni is completely out of the question. Now the issue of their farmland are completely damaged. Who takes responsibility? As Shell is contemplating moving from onshore to offshore, where there will be less attention, where there will be less monitoring, where our government is almost incapable because they depend on the oil company to even fly to offshore to see what those companies are doing. We are saying no to offshore movement. We are saying no because what happened to the onshore environment, we don't want it to happen to the offshore. You know, our people that live in the coastal area, the fishermen, the Jaws and others, they depend on that area to survive. That is their means of livelihood. Nobody benefits from the oil money. More of the money, oil money goes to private pocket. And we are saying no. And that's why we are sending a strong message to Shell and other multinational oil companies to say no. They must continue to comply with the Paris Agreement on climate change. Particularly Shell, we are very disappointed with the recent attempt by Shell to step back from their commitment to Paris Agreement alignment.
All right. We have run out of time because there's so much to talk about with regards to this matter. We can only wish you and your organization all the best as you push to bring the Shell to book, to addressing all of the matters you have raised, and the federal government paying attention to some of the issues you have also raised here this morning. We must thank you, Executive Director of African Network for Environment and Economic Justice, who is also an environmentalist, David Ugolo, for your time on the program.
Thank you, Reverend. Bye now.
Thank you very much.